Thank you, Speaker. Government Leader, why is the Prime Minister completely incapable of coming clean with Canadians and telling us the truth? Whether it's reporters or parliamentarians, no one is getting a straight answer from him. Global News reports that the Foreign Intelligence Assessment Branch of the Prime Minister's own department, Leader, the Privy Council Office, prepared a special report in January of 2022, intended for the Prime Minister and senior PMO staff. It stated, and I quote, "A large clandestine transfer of funds earmarked for the federal election from the PRC consulate in Toronto was transferred to an elected provincial government official via a staff transfer of a 2019 federal candidate." Yesterday, in the other place, the Prime Minister was asked repeatedly about this. He did everything but answer the questions. Why not, Leader? Why can he not come out and tell us the truth?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. The assumption behind your question, though, I think is misleading. This is, and I won't repeat everything that I said yesterday. The Prime Minister has put into place, and the government has put into place, a number of measures to address the situation, not only of what has happened in the past, but how we can protect ourselves in the future. That includes the reference to NCCOP, which I understand is accepted, and CIRA, which will set its own mandate and scope of study, the appointment of a special rapporteur, the launch of the public consultations to guide the creation of a foreign influence transparency registry, the establishment of the National Counter-Foreign Interference Coordinator in Public Safety Canada to coordinate our efforts to combat foreign interference. These processes are the appropriate ones, given the sensitivity and classified nature of the information that's relevant to these issues. The leaking of information that, to which reference was made yesterday and is rampant throughout the media is not the way for a responsible Parliament to deal with these issues.
Senator Plett.
Well, of course, my question was, why didn't he answer questions, not what is he doing on the side? But you raised NCCOP. Another document provided to the Global News was an unredacted copy of an August 2019 report prepared by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. This committee reports directly to the Prime Minister, and he and his office approve redactions or edits to their reports before they're made public. And by the way, Leader, this is a committee that the Prime Minister has been bragging about, all registered, recognized parties are part of. And ironically, he is failing to appoint somebody from the official opposition in the Senate to that committee, but appoints independent, supposedly independent senators, and not somebody from the Conservative Party of Canada, Leader. I'm curious about that, Leader. Why is that not happening? But my question is, and I'll continue with this, Global News says that this report, and I quote, offered several examples of alleged Chinese election interference from 2015 to 2018 that involved the targeting and funding of candidates. The Prime Minister would have seen this report, Leader. He saw it and did nothing about it. And I have to wonder if he wants the leaks of both this report and the PCO report investigated the same way that he wants the CSIS whistleblowers hunted down. Leader, you said this committee would get to the bottom of this is in a responsible and prudent way. Maybe we need to have a Conservative on the committee and from the Senate. That might help us. How is a secret committee whose reports the Prime Minister already ignores going to do that?
Senator Gold.
The position of the government is clear. It has confidence in the Committee of Parliamentarians. It welcomes the work that it did. And as I said, I commend to all senators their report on foreign interference. It continues to have confidence in the members who represent all parties, and it will fall upon us as parliamentarians to assess the quality of the work that's done through all the processes that I underlined. I do want to also underline the fact that much of what is being reported in the media comes from anonymous, leaked sources, which I regret seems to be a currency in this debate. I think we as Canadians and as parliamentarians should be careful to applaud and approve the leaking of classified information by those who take oaths to preserve it.
Senator Housakis.
Yeah. Today, colleagues, the defense from the government leader is fake news. We can't trust the Globe and Mail, and we can't trust legitimate news outlets. Interesting. Senator Gold, several times in your replies to our questions yesterday, you said that we need to get serious about allegations of dealing with foreign interference in our electoral system. Well, I can assure you, Senator Gold, that we've been very serious, consistent, asking these questions for a very long time. But it's time your government gets serious when it comes to dealing with foreign influence in our country and in our electoral system. We've had a Prime Minister for the last few days has been flip-flopping his stories nonstop on all these allegations. He's been vacillating, and we've seen no action whatsoever except a number of stall tactics and trying to keep Canadians in the dark. Now, all of a sudden, we have a special rapporteur who's going to solve the problem. Well, Senator Gold, we have an ethics commissioner right now advising that your cabinet members undergo specialized ethics training because his office is just too busy over at the other place. We have a record number of outside consultant contracts that your government has given out and they've done that in the midst of a bloating civil service. In the meantime, your government can't provide basic services. And now he needs someone, of course, to advise him on how to deal with allegations of foreign interference on an election campaign where the allegations claim he participated with his party in that interference. My question is about the Prime Minister regurgitating an announcement that they will hold public consultations in implementing a foreign agents registry. We've heard that now over the last few days. High time we do the right thing. The United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, they already have this legislation in place, government leader. But public consultation by your government was announced a year ago that they were going to do this, more than a year ago. Has a date been set for these consultations? No. Has the methodology been established? No. What steps have been taken to launch this public consultation? None. So the question is simple. What concrete action has been taken other than these announcements that have never been followed through?
Senator Gold.
Well, you've certainly included a lot of various measures in your question. The consultation is one of a suite of measures that I've already announced, and it's the position of the government that it is that this combination of measures is going to address the problem in the most appropriate way.
Senator Housakis.
These announcements were put into place, were made a year ago. This problem now that has arisen because of courage on the part of CSIS officials who obviously were exasperated by the Prime Minister, and they had to go to the media to get this out in the public, have no faith in this government. There's a bill before this chamber that sets out the implementation of a foreign agent registry. It mirrors a bill that had been tabled in the other place in the previous parliament and ignored then by the government as well. Both were drafted with wide consultation from the diaspora and the very communities that are being intimidated. It's been a full year that this bill has been sitting here, and Mr. Trudeau's senators couldn't be bothered to speak once on this issue. There's been one speech, no follow-up, except procrastination on it. It's the job of parliamentarians to study such things. That's what the public expects us to do. It's our role and our obligation. So why don't we do our job, and why doesn't your government embrace Bill to S37, send it to committee for study, send it to committee for review, get it past this place quickly, as we've done other bills that we think of are of public importance. We've seen how we come together quickly on issues of public importance and get bills over to the other side quickly. We can do that with S237 and get the ball going instead of wasting another year in consultations and maybe have another election before we get anything done.
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question, and I respect and the government respects the work of public bills in the Senate, but as you know, and it indeed is a position that your leader has taken with me and which I accept and respect, is that the negotiation on the passage of non-government bills is left to the leaders of the parliamentary groups and is not the responsibility of the GRO.
Senator Lofrida.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the government representative in the Senate. Nearly two years ago, I asked a question on the government's action plan for women in the economy. Yesterday was International Women's Day, so I thought it would be appropriate to ask you about the work of the task force that was created to advance gender equity and address systemic barriers and inequities faced by women in the economy, particularly within the context of the pandemic and the recovery. 18 incredible women served on the panel, and I understand they must treat as confidential all discussions, recommendations, and reports. According to its terms of reference, the task force operated for 12 months and should have concluded its work by late 2021. Senator Gold, I have no doubt the task force has done exceptional work and provided the government with sound advice. I believe Canadians, particularly those within the business community, would also benefit from its recommendations. Can you confirm that the task force conducted and concluded its work and has a report been produced?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question and for underlining the important work. I don't know for sure, so I'm going to have to make inquiries, and I'll report back as soon as I can.
Senator Lofrida, supplementary.
Well, thank you for the answer, and I will impatiently await that response. Beyond providing the minister with advice on assisting women in regaining full employment and improving labor force participation during the pandemic, the task force was also tasked in considering broader and longer-term issues related to gender equality and women's well-being, such as the gender wage gap and women's underrepresentation in leadership positions. Can you provide us with how the advice of the task force helped shape and influence some of the policy choices the government made in the past 2 years that have had an impact on women in the economy? And I do understand from your first answer you don't have the report, but maybe when you do provide a written response, you can include those answers.
Senator Gold.
I certainly will, and you're quite right. I can't answer specifically how the task force report might have influenced things, but this is the addressing gender equity and equality and inequality is an ongoing process, and it's not. It didn't begin with this task force, and it won't end with the report. There are a number of measures that the government has done that have tangible and important benefits for women across the country. National system of early learning and childcare will have an enormous impact on the labor. The ability of women to participate in the labor force. Labor force participation rate for Canadian women in their prime working years is at a record 85.6%. There has also been improvements since this government took office in the participation rate to which I just referred. It's risen by over 3%, approximately 3% since then. But I'll make those inquiries, Senator, and get back to you.
Senator Cormier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Senator Cormier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Gold, the Health Canada directive on donations that make it inadmissible is very troubling. The directive on sperm donation disqualifies donations for men who have had sex with men for the 3 prior months is very troubling. There was a decision before the Superior Court of Ontario to amend this directive. Senator Gold, why doesn't Health Canada make its policy more inclusive and non-discriminatory towards gay and bisexual men, as Canadian Blood Services and EMA Quebec have recently done with respect to blood donation. Senator Gold, thank you for the question, colleagues. The government has committed to ensuring that the regulations in terms of sperm donations and blood donations continue to follow the most recent scientific data in terms of assisted procreation. With respect to the recent criterion for blood donors, as you mentioned, for example, the policies of Canadian Blood Services and Quebec, similar updates could be made in terms of sperm donations as well. The government wishes to apply non-discriminatory and safe and inclusive regulations. Health Canada knows that a request has been made with the Ontario Superior Court and is currently reviewing the request. For the moment, we cannot say more. Senator Cormier, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that answer. We will wait and see how the government's measures evolves. A recent report on access to justice for trans people is unequivocal in stating that the justice system does not provide adequate solutions to the legal problems of trans people. Disturbingly, the report states that many trans people avoid using the justice system altogether because it causes them to experience discrimination and sometimes feel unsafe. Senator Gold, within the limits of its jurisdiction in this matter, how will the federal government respond to this report in order to make the justice system more accessible for and adapted to the needs of trans people? Senator Gold, thank you for the question, and also for mentioning that the federal jurisdiction is limited in this matter, so I will make inquiries with the government to see to find out what the status is of this conversation and discussions, which are regular between the Justice Department and its team and its provincial and territorial counterparts.
Thank you, sir. My question is for the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Gold. At the meeting of the First Ministers last month, the federal government announced additional health care transfers to the provinces and territories. While health care funding remains a major issue for the province, the lack of licensed doctors is becoming more and more concerning. It has been reported that there are an estimated 13,000 mostly foreign-trained doctors who are unable to practice in Canada today as a result of the discriminatory red tape policies across the country. Prime Minister has made several promises, including in 2019, 2021, and more recently in 2023, to help provinces and territories hire thousands of doctors and healthcare staff. Senator Gold, has the federal government put into action its promises of helping provinces hire additional doctors and healthcare staff? Can you provide us with specific details of actions taken by the government instead of just pledging funding?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you, Senator Smith, for the question. The licensing of physicians is a provincial and territorial responsibility exclusively, and there is a problem because the provinces and territories have been slow to liberalize their rules to allow for the easier accreditation of those with degrees from elsewhere. And indeed, the problem is not restricted to doctors coming from outside of Canada. There are problems within Canada. Now, there have been interesting and welcome initiatives from the Atlantic region, but still work needs to be done. You made mention to doing things other than providing funds, but we should not gloss over the fact that the injection of federal funds into the provincial system and the enhancement of those funds, almost $200 billion over 10 years to improve healthcare services, goes a long way to giving the provinces the ability to absorb new doctors, to pay for new doctors, and other healthcare professionals, one should add. The Minister of Health works with his counterparts across the country on a regular basis, and I will make inquiries as to whether the subject of licensing is how that is progressing on the agenda and report back. But the ability of the federal government, and indeed Parliament, to legislate in this area is quite limited by virtue of the Constitution.
Senator Smith, supplementary.
Yes, sir. The government's new immigration targets will create additional demand pressures on the healthcare system. These new immigrants will require access to hospitals, family doctors, and other health-related services. Immigrants also bring with them the wealth of knowledge and expertise in every sector of our economy, including healthcare. Is the federal government working with provinces and territories on foreign credential recognition programs? And are there specific progress details that you could provide?
Senator Gold.
Well, I don't have more details than to say how pleased I am, and I think we should all be, that the federal government has concluded agreements with 9 provinces, and discussions are ongoing within others, the other remaining provinces and the territories. These discussions, as you know, and the structure of these arrangements include bilateral funding arrangements, which will be tailored to the needs and requests of the provinces and territories. So again, I have every confidence that the discussions that have gone on and will continue to go on in the structuring and crafting of these bilateral agreements will take account of the issues that you raised. But again, I will make inquiries and report back.
Senator Dalphond.
Merci, Monsieur.
Senator Delphine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative, in the last election, the Liberal Party promised Canadians to ban the live export of horses for slaughter. Yet, horses continue to suffer. On March 1st, 2023, the Globe and Mail reported about the continued practice of shipping draft horses to Japan by cargo plane, up to 4 in each crate, without food and water for up to 25 to 30 hours. Senator Gold, when is the government going to act on its promise to ban this kind of shipment to Japan?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you. What you describe is troubling, to say the least. And indeed, the ban on the export of live horses is part of the minister's mandate letter, Minister Bibeau. I've been informed that the government is in discussion with key stakeholders and is evaluating different approaches to determine the best course of action. But in the absence of a ban on the export of live horses for slaughter, at present, the CFIA continues to enforce the relevant regulations to ensure that horses are fit for travel and, importantly, are transported humanely.
Senator Dalphond, supplémentaire.
Oui, Monsieur.
Senator Delphine, supplementary question? Yes, Mr. Speaker. I understand that the government is studying the question, but I remind you that the American government banned this practice 17 years ago, and that for the past 5 years, 14,500 horses were shipped to Japan to become fresh sushi for those who can afford it. Do you not believe the time has come to finally put an end to this practice rather than finding humanitarian ways of sending them to slaughter, just as the United States did? Senator Gold, that is the government's goal. Of course, that's why it was in the mandate letter. I will inquire with the government to find out what progress is underway, and will return to this chamber with a response.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. My question is to Senator Gold. One day after International Women's Day, I want to acknowledge the courage and perseverance of thousands of women and girls who played soccer and other sports in Afghanistan until the Taliban returned to power in August 2021 and are now at extreme risk just because they are female and athletes. In Canada, girls' soccer has been growing in popularity for years, with a high of 85,000 girls playing in organized leagues, soccer federations, and school clubs. But now a decline in enrollment is anticipated, directly linked to ongoing equity disputes and the disgraceful second-class treatment given the women's national team of Olympic gold players. Yesterday, the Toronto Star reported that promising young female athletes are becoming disillusioned by what they see. Despite reaching an interim funding agreement last week, only secured after the team was prepared to strike and threatened with lawsuits, players still state that the fight for permanent funding and equity is far from resolved. Senator Gold, Sports Canada funds more than 58 national sports federations, ranging from alpine ski to curling, hockey, soccer, wrestling. Additionally, it funds another 31 national multi-sport service organizations and related sports support bodies. Can you inform this chamber if attention is being given to whether the inequities and injustices suffered by these world-class women's soccer players are not also systemic in all the sports relying on federal public dollars?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question and for underlying what sadly we all know has been the case and remains the case, the gap in funding and support historically and no doubt still the case in too many areas between men's and women's sports, as it is still men's and women's wages. I don't know the specific answer, Senator McPhedran. I'll make some inquiries and try to get an answer as quickly as I can.
Senator Boisvenu. Oh, sorry, Senator McFadden, the supplementary?
Yes. Thank you, Your Honour. And in addition to that inquiry, Senator Gold, I wonder if you could add a more specific question, which is the extent to which the Government of Canada allows for non-disclosure agreements to be used against athletes where there are disputes and resolutions.
Senator Gold.
I'll certainly add that to my question.
Thank you kindly.
Senator Boisvenu.
Senator Boisvenu. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Senator Gold, I'd like to come back to my question yesterday. I asked you about the great growing influence of the Chinese government in Canada, and you replied, a more or less satisfactory answer. You said, we're learning and we're changing what we're doing, and this is why the Canadian government is taking important measures to protect us and are reviewing several aspects of our relationship with China. This morning, we learned that the RCMP was investigating three stations in Longueuil and Montreal. There are already 5 in Toronto. There must be some in Vancouver as well, since there is a high Chinese population in Vancouver. My question is quite simple. Faced with this inaction on the part of the Prime Minister, going back all the way to 2018, are we not before a Prime Minister who lacks political judgment? Senator Gold, no, not at all, and it's quite concerning. This news about the police stations, quote unquote, in Brossard, not far from where I live in Montreal, and elsewhere too. The investigations that are underway, I hope, will bear fruit. But it is not the case, as I continue to insist, that the government and the Prime Minister are doing nothing. On the contrary, they take it quite seriously. And as I said, there are measures in place, including independent investigations by the police to ensure that we can fight these efforts for foreign interference in our democratic business. Senator Boisvenu, we know that the Communist Party has influenced things in Canada. We've got It was confirmed by someone in Longueuil. So there is an influence by the Communist Party of China in Canada. It's obvious. So if Mr. Trudeau is not naive, if he is not an accomplice, if he is not lacking political judgment, why would he object to an independent inquiry in the other place? And why does he not allow his chief of staff to come and testify? And why is this whole process not being undertaken with all three political parties, including appointing a rapporteur? Senator Gold, thank you for the question. The fact that the consul or the Chinese representative is bragging about his country's influence, excuse me, but I will quote the eminent journalist Chantal Hébert in saying, look, that is part of their job, is bragging about their influence. So, that being said, we take it seriously. I'm not going to repeat in the short time we have left in this question period, to repeat once again why, according to the government, the processes that they have implemented are more appropriate to arrive at the answers we need.
Honourable Senators, time for question period has expired. Delayed answers. Réponse deferée. Senator Gold.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Honourable Senators, I have the honour to table the answer to the following written questions. Reply to question number 37, dated November 23, 2021, appearing on the order paper and notice paper in the name of the Honourable Senator Plett regarding the Department of National Defence Infrastructure. Reply to question number 142, dated March 30, 2022, appearing on the order paper and notice paper in the name of the Honourable Senator Housakis regarding Military Family Appreciation Day. Honourable Senators, I also have the honour to table the answer to the following oral questions. Réponse à la question orale posée au Sénat.
Response to the oral question asked in the Senate on April 26, 2022 by the Honourable Senator Petit-Clair concerning the Canada Disability Benefit. Response to the oral question asked in the Senate on December 15, 2022 by the Honourable Senator Cordy concerning the Great Lakes Fishery Commission.
Orders of the day.